We hear a lot of complaints about cancel culture from the likes of conservative idiots like Josh Hawley, who claim that companies like Coca-Cola are gonna cancel you, the consumer, if they don't like you. Obviously, he's trying to weigh in on Coca-Cola and other companies paying lip service to people who are outraged over Georgia's voter suppression bill. But really, when you take a step back and look at cancel culture, the very people who cry about it the loudest tend to be the individuals who implement it. And that's certainly the case when you look at certain organizations that are funded by the Koch brothers, who literally fund groups that have the sole intention of intimidating professors into basically halting all of their messaging, anything that might share real information with students about our history, how broken our economic system is. And I wanna give you this example. So The Intercept wrote a fantastic piece. Alice Speary is the one who authored it. And she talks about a group known as Campus Reform. And so over the last year, she writes, Campus Reform has targeted hundreds of college professors like Hatmi, and you should read about Hatmi's story in this piece, leading to online harassment campaigns, doxing, threats of violence, and calls on universities to fire their faculty. Now, Professor Hatmi's story revolved around the fact that members of Campus Reform approached him about, some advice, some counseling, and he decided not to work with the organization after there was a little bit of a Google search and you realize what Campus Reform is really about. And there are too many ties to white nationalists, white supremacists, and it was obviously his right to say, no, I'm not interested in working with this organization. Well, there was consequences to that. They decided to attack him, list him on their website, put him completely out of context, and that led to a very clear harassment campaign that luckily he was not intimidated by, but others aren't so lucky. The professors were targeted over a variety of liberal positions, but a majority were singled out over their comments on race. And Black professors were predominantly, or disproportionately, I should say, targeted. Those who discussed topics like Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and Palestine were especially subjected to threats. And guess what? Not only do the threats come pouring in, but the people associated with Campus Reform also reach out to college administrators and essentially pressure them to fire the professors, which sounds a lot like canceling to me. But we should talk about, I'm gonna get to how this is funded and just how perverse and prevalent this is. But before I do, John, immediate thoughts.
Sure, it definitely sounds like cancellation. It sounds like these professors say things that are politically incorrect, I guess, from their point of view. Campus Reform is a group that we actually spent a long time talking about on TYT University way back in the day. They've been doing this for a long time, and I'm glad that you're pointing it out, not only because it's a demonstration that right-wing canceling and all of that has been going on for a long time, but that it's going on in like the specific battleground that these supposed free speech warriors on the right have focused on the most. They say that the issue with colleges is that there's no free speech for conservatives, that if you are conservative and you believe the wrong things, you will be shunned, you'll get bad grades or whatever. And this entire time they've been trying to fire people for talking about the wrong things. That it's so specific. And like, they know what they're doing. They know the game that they're playing. I might point out a ridiculous bit of hypocrisy on like Tucker Carlson's part when it comes to cancel culture, because we need to understand that he's doing it. But I'm far more frustrated with people like Bill Maher and articles about cancel culture that try to pretend that this is genuinely some sort of left-wing thing. That like, yeah, no, we really have to allow for like politically incorrect speech which the left is coming for. No, just some people don't like some things, and sometimes the left that does it, sometimes the right that does it, sometimes the centrist that does it. That is just how the world works. That is indisputable, but the narrative about censorship, I think that is something that we actually need to engage in. We can't simply like just let Bill Maher win and just say, yeah, you're right, it's just on us, because that allows them to do stuff like Campus Reform is and get away with it because there's no convenient narrative to fit it in like they have for cancellation.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think the big difference between, and look, I think that it can be pretty toxic, right? I do not agree with progressive minded people going through tweets from 10, 15 years ago and then deciding to engage in a pressure campaign to get that individual fired based on what they tweeted a long time ago. Like, I think people are capable of changing, and I think that that culture is incredibly toxic. I don't like it. But the difference between what we're talking about here with campus reform and the toxicity I just mentioned is that this is a well-funded, orchestrated effort to essentially propagandize students, propagandize individuals watching the news, and trick people into thinking that their ideas are the right ideas, the popular ideas. We certainly see that with troll farms on social media. Anytime a conservative tweets something that's obviously incredibly unpopular, and actual professional polling shows that these policy proposals are unpopular, they'll just have troll farms that pretend as if it's incredibly popular in order to sway public opinion and persuade people into thinking that their thoughts are actually incorrect. And look, there have been consequences, unjustified consequences for these professors. There was a survey done on some of these professors who were targeted by campus reform, and 12% reported facing disciplinary action as a result of a campus reform story. And 3 people said that they actually ended up losing their jobs as a result. So this is exactly what Ben Shapiro and Ann Coulter pretended to be so concerned about on college campuses. Oh, they don't like us, they don't like our speeches, they're trying to cancel us. This is supposed to be a place where you have a free marketplace of ideas, a free exchange of ideas. Understand that that was nothing more than a personal branding exercise that unfortunately in the short term did work out for them. But again, you take a closer look and you see what the reality is. So let's talk about how campus reform is funded. Campus reform is published by the Leadership Institute, a nonprofit that has trained conservative activists for 4 decades, to your point, John, through the generous funding of billionaire donors like the Koch family. The Institute reported more than $16 million in revenue in 2018 alone. And they certainly do have ties to white supremacist groups. Just to give you a few examples, Matthew Heimbach, a neo-Nazi activist, former YAF chapter leader, and once Leadership Institute trainee, told Huffington Post in 2016 that the Institute, quote, trained this entire next generation of white nationalists. The Institute also employed Kevin Deanna, another former YAF leader, who started the campus-based white supremacist group Youth for Western Civilization. And when they're approached by these organizations, understand that especially for college students, the offer is pretty lucrative and hard to pass up. And I think that you're also seeing this with progressive, independent talk show hosts. All of a sudden, suddenly they're spouting right-wing talking points. I think they get approached with money offers, and I'll give you proof of that in a minute. But in the case of campus reform, the site paid $50 per story or $100 if they included video or photos. Soon, campus reform established a tiered system. After publishing 4 articles, a correspondent could rise from bronze to silver and make $75 a piece. After 15 articles, they would rise to gold and receive $100 per story. Look, I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. That's actually more money than what some professional writers make writing freelance. And it's just, for a college student, that's certainly appealing. It's very lucrative, and that's how they get people hooked. And John, before I get your final thoughts on this, I do wanna show what I was talking about when it comes to left-wing hosts getting approached by right wingers to essentially shill for the right wing. David Pakman shared an experience he had, and I think it's telling. Let's watch.
Had a lunch with them, and they said to me, listen, what you're doing is interesting, it's fine. You know, my show was much smaller at the time, but the right is far more well-funded. And what I'm wondering is, would you, for X amount of dollars, become a conservative and do conservative radio? Like, how much do you care? How much is this about your politics versus how much of this is about money and business? Because I think that you're good, but the left this was when online was far less dominant and terrestrial radio was still the thing. The left just doesn't do well on talk radio. The right does. And I could get you a job making X if you were to do right-wing radio and somehow shift to the right. At the time, X number of dollars was about 3 times what I was making. And I said, no, I couldn't live with myself. I'm not playing a character here.
So I believe David Pakman. I believe him because it goes along with what I've seen personally in the media, but also it's the same, John, it's like the exact same, they ripped a page out of the playbook from campus reform. Campus reform offers a way for student writers to build up a portfolio, a chance for their stories to go viral, and access to a steady stream of media gigs. Pay close attention, with the most high profile being appearances on Fox and Friends or Tucker Carlson Tonight. Even non-writers can benefit, making $50 for tipping the site off to supposed liberal abuse.
Yeah, if I were in college, I would have like me and a friend just abuse that, like keep calling each other lefties to get the money. Yeah, I'm not surprised that these organizations exist. They don't have to truly turn a profit. They get given huge amounts of money that's then just flooded in these things. Like those articles that the kids are writing probably aren't earning anything like that for the actual companies, but it doesn't matter. It's a service that the right needs. They need to generate the illusion of content and authenticity. They do the same thing with shows too. Infusing huge amounts of advertising into the lamest independent voices. And if you put enough advertising online, billboards, all of that, you can get some people, some trolls to watch this stuff. And it doesn't have to actually earn money. It might eventually, but it doesn't have to, because the true money is in things like tax cuts, deregulation, all of that, which this helps to ensure. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating, but I can understand if you're in college getting $100 to write a little article, that would be really appealing. I worked as a barista and as a waiter in college. That might have seemed really appealing if they'd offered it. And I'm sure if you're higher profile, you're probably pulling in a lot more money. I mean, look at people like Dave Rubin, who supposedly was a lefty and then started getting paid big amounts of money to give speeches about free speech on campus, specifically to put a bow on this. Getting huge amounts of money that he never could have earned actually doing something like what he truly believes, if he can be said to have any true beliefs. Right.
And it's the best thing to, I guess, combat it is to know that it's happening. And it's a well-oiled machine, well-funded, and you see it everywhere. I remember when the Koch brothers had the strategy of just infusing science departments with a ton of cash in order to prevent any real academic work on climate change. That was their initial strategy. But obviously this is a much darker strategy. And of course, campus reform has a website that makes it appear as though they're doing actual unbiased reporting. But clearly with their agenda in place, it's anything but unbiased.